Colorado Territory. Spring of 1872. The wind howled through the pines like it remembered something the world had forgotten. Xavier Dalton reined in his horse at the ridge, eyes narrowing on the cabin nestled deep in the valley. Smoke curled from its chimney, soft and steady, like someone unbothered by the rumors that circled around her like vultures. "They call her a witch," the barkeep in Trinidad had said. "Survived a whole winter alone up there. No man, no help. Some say she talks to animals. Some say it ain't natural." But Xavier had seen enough death in the war to know what real evil looked like. And it did not live in a quiet cabin with chickens pecking the snow or a woman cutting firewood with her own hands. He nudged his horse forward. Willa Kerr wiped her brow with the back of her wrist, breath coming hard. The log pile near the cabin was dwindling again, and she needed more before the next storm. She had not expected anyone to ride up, not today, not ever. When she heard the hoofbeats, she reached for her rifle. By the time she stepped onto the porch, the man had already dismounted. He was tall, lean, and sun-browned, with sharp cheekbones and a look in his eyes like he had seen every kind of sorrow and kept it quiet. He raised his hand slowly. "Not here to cause trouble. Just passing through." She kept the rifle steady. "Pass through then." He glanced to the side. A child's boot sat on the porch, its toe worn through. Willa followed his gaze and stiffened. "That's none of your business." "I did not say it was," he said gently. "Name's Xavier Dalton." I saw the smoke, figured a friendly hello might be all right. "No one friendly comes this far," she said. He looked past her shoulder. "You live out here alone?" Her jaw tightened. "What are you really here for?" He hesitated, then pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket. "I was hired to find a pair of children, brother and sister, lost near Trinidad 3 months ago. Folks think maybe they didn't make it." Willa's shoulders dropped slightly, but her guard stayed up. "And what makes you think I have them?" "Because I followed small tracks through the snow last week. Too small for yours, and I saw a girl's ribbon snagged on a pine limb. Fresh." She stared at him a long time. Then, without a word, she turned and stepped inside. Xavier waited, not reaching for his Colt, not moving. When she came back, she held the door open. "You can come in. But one wrong move and I won't miss." He believed her. Inside the cabin, the air was warmer, simple but clean. A kettle hissed on the stove, and in the corner, curled under a patched quilt, lay 2 children. The oldest a girl, maybe 9, the boy younger. Both slept deeply, cheeks flushed with warmth. "They were half dead when I found them," Willa said quietly. "No shoes, near frozen. Their wagon had tipped near the canyon. No one came looking." Xavier's throat tightened. "Are they?" "They're alive. I fed them. Taught them how to keep the fire going, but I do not think they remember much from before." He stepped closer, crouched beside them. "Their names, Daisy and Declan," she said. "They told me once, only once." He looked back at her. "You saved them." "They saved me too," she said, eyes distant. "I would not have made it through the winter without someone to keep going for." He stood slowly. "And still they call you a witch." Willa's voice was bitter. "Because I lived. Because a woman alone with no man who manages not to die, that must be magic, must be unnatural." He looked at her, then really looked. The shadows under her eyes, the rawness of her palms, the way her shoulders stayed tense even now, and something shifted in his chest. "Maybe you are not a witch," he said softly. "Maybe you are just brave." Her eyes flicked up. Something broke in them. Not tears, not yet, but something close. She turned away. "You going to take them?" "They need their family," he said. "But they need to want that too." "I will not force them." "You think they would rather go with strangers than stay with me?" He hesitated. "I think they might not know what they want yet. Maybe I stay a few days. Let them remember a little more. Let them choose." Willa did not answer right away. But after a long silence, she nodded once. The barn's dry. You can sleep there, he smiled. I have slept in worse. Good, because I am not cooking for you, he chuckled. Understood. That night, Xavier sat by the fire while Willa read softly to the children. The little boy leaned against her side, blinking sleepily. The girl watched him with curious eyes. You are not like the others, Daisy whispered. Xavier leaned closer. How do you mean? You do not look scared of her. He looked over at Willa. Her hair was tied back, her face tired but kind under the flicker of firelight. No, he said. I am not scared of her at all. The next morning, Willa found him hauling water from the stream. You do not have to help, he shrugged. I want to, she crossed her arms. You do not trust I can manage alone. No, he said. I trust you more than most, but even brave people deserve help. She stared at him, unsure what to say, and then Declan ran out of the cabin, barefoot and laughing, and clung to Xavier's leg. Horse, he shouted. Can I ride your horse? Xavier laughed. You ask your guardian. Declan turned pleading eyes to Willa. She sighed. Only if Xavier walks beside you, and only for a few minutes. The boy whooped and ran for the corral. Willa watched him go, then looked at Xavier. I do not understand you, he met her eyes. What is there to understand? You are kind, but you carry something heavy, he nodded once. Everyone does, but some carry it alone for too long. She looked away. That is not your problem. Maybe I want it to be. She turned sharply, eyes wide. Why? Because you are not just brave, you are good, and I have not seen good in a long time. That silenced her, and for the first time in years, Willa did not feel quite so alone. The snow had thawed from the lower brush, revealing damp earth beneath the pines. Wild crocuses pushed up through the soil, tentative, pale lilac things that bent under their own weight. Xavier noticed them as he carried a crooked-handled bucket back from the spring. They were the first color he'd seen since riding into the valley. Willa was bent over the garden plot near the porch, her skirt tied up at her knees, sleeves rolled past her elbows. She was pulling last year's dead roots free from the thawed soil, her fingers red with cold. You're early for planting, Xavier said, setting the bucket down nearby. I know, she muttered, not looking up. The frost might take it all anyway. Still, I'd rather try than sit inside waiting for luck. He squatted across from her, brushing a stone from the dirt. You always work like it's a battle. Because it is. Daisy's voice rang out from the trees, laughter trailing. Willa's head lifted sharply, but the girl appeared a moment later, hair flying as she ran, clutching something in her hand. I found eggs, she shouted, holding up two still warm brown ones. Willa took them gently. You didn't scare the hens, Daisy shook her head. I whispered. Xavier raised a brow. Whispered? She told them she meant no harm, Willa said, placing the eggs in a basket. And they believed her. He stood, brushing soil from his pants. Seems animals trust her easier than people. Willa didn't answer. She reached for her spade again, but her grip faltered. Xavier caught the wince. Your wrist, he said. It's nothing. You favor it. She stood slowly, brushing her palms together. I fell last month with a pail of ash. It's stiff in the cold. You should splint it. I've had worse. He looked at her, not with pity, but a kind of quiet insistence. Let me help you today. You can tell me what to do. I'll keep my mouth shut. She hesitated. You don't strike me as someone who holds his tongue. He smiled faintly. I can surprise you. Willa handed him the spade. Fine. Dig from the east row, not too deep. These'll be beets if the ground's willing. He nodded and knelt. Her eyes lingered on him a moment longer, then she turned back to clearing brush. Later that afternoon, while Willa stitched a torn hem beside the stove, Xavier sat with Declan on the floor. The boy clutched a stub of charcoal and scratched clumsy lines on scrap wood. I'm making a horse, Declan said. Xavier tilted his head. Strong one, fast. You ride better than most grown men. Declan grinned, missing a front tooth. Willa didn't look up from her sewing. He's got balance. Climbs trees like a squirrel. That's so, Xavier leaned in. You think he could climb the one by the shed, pick me a handful of pine nuts? Declan jumped to his feet. I could get a whole pocket. Willa glanced up sharply. Not too high. I know, the boy said, already halfway to the door. The room quieted. The fire popped. Willa worked the needle through thick fabric, her stitches tight and even. He talks more now. Xavier leaned back against the log wall. He trusts you. I don't know if I trust myself. Some mornings I wake up and think they'll disappear. They won't. You gave them something solid to hold on to. Her hands paused. And when their kin comes for them, Xavier rested his arms over his knees. Their uncle died 2 winters ago. Their aunt remarried and moved east. There's no one left close. Willa looked at him. Then why were you sent? Town council passed around a hat, hired me to ride out, said it was a kindness, not obligation. She returned to sewing, slower this time. So what happens now? He studied her face, the way her mouth pressed firm over uncertainty. That depends on what you want. I didn't ask for this, I know. But I care what happens to them. So do I. She looked at him then, not guarded, not cold, just tired and a little afraid. Outside, Declan's boots thundered across the porch. He burst through the door, breathless. I got the nuts, Xavier smiled. That's a brave climb. Willa took the pine nuts from his cupped hands, fingers brushing his. You're freezing, he nodded proudly. I'm still brave, that you are, she whispered, pressing a kiss to his messy hair. That night, after the children had curled into their blanket heap, Xavier stepped outside. He leaned against the porch post, watching the moon rise over the ridge. Willa joined him a few minutes later, coat buttoned to her neck, arms folded. She didn't speak. He handed her the tin mug from the railing, warm cider steeped with dried apple peel. She sipped, then held it close to her chest. You always carry cider, he shook his head. Found some in your pantry, figured I owed you after digging up your whole garden. Her breath fogged in the air. I can't remember the last time someone brought me something. You bring plenty to this place, Willa. She stared out across the trees. You'll leave soon. Yes, but not tonight. No, she nodded, quiet. Then, without looking at him, she said, I don't know how to be anything except alone. You don't have to be anything right now. She turned, met his eyes in the low light. What if I'm not ready? He reached out slowly, brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Then I'll wait. And for the first time in years, Willa didn't feel like she was standing on the edge of something about to give way. She felt the ground beneath her solid, warm and chosen. The wind settled for a spell, leaving the tall grass still and the trees holding their breath. Late afternoon light threaded through the branches, casting long shadows against the cabin walls. Willa sat on the porch steps with a basket of wool in her lap, her fingers carding the fleece with practiced rhythm. The sheep had been hers since the second winter, when an old trapper traded her a pair for dried venison and a mended coat. They were half wild and ornery, but they gave enough for spinning. Inside, Declan and Daisy were quiet, napping, likely, after the long morning spent gathering kindling and hunting for mushrooms by the creek. Willa had let them go far today, trusting Xavier's steady presence as the children roamed ahead. He had an eye for terrain, always scanning the slope before letting them wander, always listening. She didn't hear his boots until the porch creaked. Found a cedar split not far from the ridge. Dry inside, he said, setting a bundle of thick branches against the wall. She nodded. That'll burn hot. He leaned against the post, wiping sap from his palms with a square of cloth. You ever think about leaving this place? She looked up from the fleece. Leave where? This valley, the mountains, somewhere easier. She let the wool fall still in her lap. There's no easy place, just different kinds of hard. He considered that. You ever been east of the Arkansas? Once, when I was 16. My mother wanted to see her sister before she passed. You liked it. Too many voices. Too many rooms full of nothing. He chuckled under his breath. That's one way to put it. She looked at him then, her gaze sharp. You thinking of heading east? No, he said. I was thinking of staying west, just didn't figure where yet. The light shifted again, turning gold around the edges. Willa gathered the last of the wool and set the basket beside her. Most men don't stay long out here. They think they want quiet, but it unnerves them. I've known gunfire louder than any silence. She stood, brushing her skirts. You've known more than that. I can see it in the way you hold your jaw when you think no one's looking. He stepped down beside her, his boots crunching on the gravel. And what do you see? You're waiting for something to go wrong, she said. Like the peace is a lie you don't trust yet. He nodded slowly. I've seen peace taken quick, but there's something different about this place. It holds its ground. She glanced toward the barn. It wasn't always like that. I used to sleep with my rifle across my knees. Every creak made me think someone was coming to take what little I had. And now, she hesitated, then said, I sleep. The admission sat between them, quiet and plain. He looked toward the trees. I was a boy when my brother went missing in the high country. We searched for 6 days. Snow up to the saddle. I still wake up thinking I hear his voice some nights. Willa didn't speak. After the war, he went on, I thought I'd never get still again, couldn't sit through a meal without checking my back. Her voice was quiet. And now he looked at her. Now I sit by your fire and forget what I've lost, just for a while. Willa's eyes flicked to his face, then away. You say things plain. I've learned not to wait. She took a steadying breath. I don't know what to do with kindness when it stays. You don't have to do anything. Just let it stay. The door creaked behind them and Daisy stepped out, blinking at the sun. She clutched a doll Willa had sewn from spare cloth, its arms crooked but beloved. I'm hungry, she said. Willa reached for her hand. Come help me peel carrots then. We'll stew the rabbit from yesterday. Daisy nodded and followed her inside. Xavier lingered on the porch, the warmth of the light pressing against his back. He looked out over the valley, then toward the path beyond the ridge. For the first time in years, he felt no pull to follow it. Inside, the scent of sautéing onions rose with the steam from the pot. Willa stood at the hearth, sleeves rolled, hair falling loose from its braid. She didn't look at him when he stepped in, but she handed him a second knife and pointed to the turnips. Since you're still here, she said, might as well make yourself useful. He took the blade without a word, sat beside her near the cutting board and began to slice. The silence that settled between them was no longer heavy. It was warm, worn in, like something built slow and true. The kind of silence only shared by those who'd earned it. And this time, neither of them waited for it to break. The rains came early that year, soft and steady, soaking the valley in a hush that muffled every sound but the crackle of wet branches and the slow drip from the eaves. The children passed the days drawing with sticks on the hearthstones, whispering stories to each other in the language only children understand. Willa had given up on planting more for now. The earth needed drying time, and her wrist still ached if she twisted it too fast. Xavier spent the mornings fixing what the winter had worn out, tightening hinges, patching the barn's leeward wall, fashioning a new latch for the smokehouse door from a scrap of iron and a square of leather. He worked with quiet attention, as if he'd always known the measure of her tools, the quirks of the land, the way the roof sagged a little more on the north side. That afternoon, Willa leaned over the table, studying a hand-drawn map he'd laid flat. It was old, creased and stained, with rough outlines of the San Juan Range and the smaller valleys tucked between. "You made this?" she asked. He nodded, wiping his hands with a cloth. "Years back. I was tracking a man who ran cattle off a widow's land. Took me 5 days to find his camp. Left this valley marked because it felt different somehow, her brow furrowed. What made it different? It felt like a place that didn't want to be found. She traced the ridge line with her finger. And yet you came back. I didn't expect to. She folded the edge of the map. You always chase trouble for strangers. Sometimes strangers turn out to be worth the trouble. She met his eyes, and neither of them looked away. Later, as dusk settled and the rain softened to a mist, they sat beneath the lean-to behind the barn, watching steam lift from the damp grass. Willa handed him a half-mended glove, the leather split along the thumb. "I patched the other," she said. "This one's worse off." He turned it over in his hands. "You always mend what's broken, if it's still got use in it." He held the glove between them. "And if it doesn't, then I make something new." A quiet passed between them. She could hear the children inside, the low murmur of Daisy's voice reading aloud to Declan, her cadence sure and steady. "I never asked what brought you west," Willa said. Xavier leaned back against the post. "A letter. Ma wrote from Kansas in the fall of '61. Said my older brother had taken the family horse and joined the Union cavalry. She needed one of us home. I rode all the way from Virginia to bring him back." "Did you?" "No, found his grave near Fort Scott. He'd gone down with a fever before I even crossed the Mississippi." Willa didn't speak. The rain had begun again, faint and even. "I stayed on with a freight crew after that," he continued. "Then took to trail work. Figured I'd stay useful." She watched him as he spoke, the way his voice stayed level, like he'd told it so many times it no longer cut. But his hands flexed against his knees, like the grief still lived in the bones. "You ever think of writing her?" she asked. "She died the next winter." "I never got a chance." Willa reached for the glove, her touch brushing his. "That's a hard thing." He looked at her, and for a moment the years between then and now seemed to fall away. "You ever lose someone?" she nodded slowly. "My husband, out near Hesperus. He stepped through a rotten plank and fell into the old mine shaft. I was 23. Xavier's voice dropped. "You stayed here after." "I had nowhere else to go, no family to run to, and the land needed tending." She exhaled. "I didn't expect to last the winter." "You did more than last." She looked at him, really looked. "People didn't know what to make of it. A woman alone, still breathing. They called you a witch for surviving." She nodded. "Until you said maybe I was just brave. I meant it, I know." The wind stirred and brought the scent of rain-damp pine. Willa's hand rested beside his on the bench, close but not touching. He turned his palm upward. She hesitated, then placed her hand in his. "We're not strangers anymore," he said. This time she didn't pull away. Inside, the fire burned low and steady. The children had fallen asleep beside the embers, curled into each other like roots beneath soil. The storm passed in silence. And in the shelter of the lean-to, something quiet and certain took hold, like the first shoot of green through thawed earth. Small but unshakable. By the time the rains gave way to clearer skies, the cabin sat wrapped in the scent of thawed pine and turned earth. The creek, swollen from weeks of runoff, ran fast but no longer threatened its banks. Birds had come back in flocks, their calls threading through the trees like threads pulled through worn linen. Willa stood at the edge of the garden, sleeves damp with dew, watching new shoots push up from the soil, beets and turnips mostly, planted late but stubbornly taking root. Xavier approached from the barn, wiping his hands on a cloth. He'd been sanding down the stall rails, repairing where the older boards had begun to soften. His shirt was pushed to the elbows, a fresh scrape across one forearm where a nail had snagged him. "You'll wear yourself thin," Willa said, not unkindly. He stopped beside her, following her gaze to the green sprigs. "Better than sitting still. I never knew what to do with idle hands. She bent to check a row, brushing soil aside to check the depth of growth. That's because you're always waiting for something to go wrong. He didn't deny it. These last weeks, I expected the road to call me back. I thought I'd feel it in my teeth, but I don't. Willa straightened. What do you feel instead? He looked at her, not rushed, not hesitant. Like maybe I've already arrived. She didn't answer right away, just tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, then looked toward the cabin. Daisy's been asking if you'll teach her to carve. She found a piece of softwood and tried to shape it herself. Cut her thumb near to the bone. I'll show her after breakfast. You should know she's not patient. I've seen worse teachers. Willa gave a short breath of laughter, then turned serious. I've been thinking about what happens if you stay. He waited. It's not just the children. It's me too. I've lived with only my own counsel for near 6 years. I'm not used to making room. I don't need you to change anything. I know, she said. But I want to. She stepped back, wiping her hands on her apron. Let's go inside. The biscuits should be done by now. The cabin was warm with morning light and the smell of browned butter and flour. Declan sat cross-legged on the floor with a tin lid, spinning it like a wheel. Daisy was perched on a stool, watching the oven door like it might open on its own. Xavier took his usual place near the hearth, easing down onto the stool he'd repaired 2 days ago. Willa handed him a plate with a biscuit split and steaming, a smear of honey running down the edge. He took her wrist gently as she passed. I never thought I'd find a place that felt like mine. She looked down at him, eyes steady. And now, he stood, slow and certain, setting the plate aside untouched. Now I don't want to leave. Willa didn't step back. Then don't. He took her face in his hands, rough thumbs brushing her cheeks. You sure? Yes, she said against his palms. I want you here, not just for them, for me. He kissed her, then quiet, long, the kind that answers a question without needing words. The next morning, Daisy was up early, watching Xavier whittle a small horse from a block of pine. Declan clung to Willa's side as she boiled water for washing, his voice rising with excitement when he spotted a rabbit beneath the fence line. The days passed smoother after that, the kind of smooth born not from ease, but from trust. By midsummer, Willa traded a bolt of homespun cloth for a second milk cow from a rancher 2 valleys over. Xavier hitched the cart and took Daisy along, letting her hold the reins most of the way home. Declan worked beside Willa in the garden, pulling weeds and asking endless questions about seeds and roots. They built a new room off the back of the cabin, Xavier laying the frame while Willa cut shingles from scrap. It would be the children's. The space gave them each a corner of their own, and Willa, for the first time, allowed herself to imagine what growing up here might look like. That fall, they married under a yellowing cottonwood near the creek. No preacher, no papers, just hands joined and vows spoken plain. Daisy picked wildflowers and braided them into Willa's hair. Declan stood beside Xavier, holding a carved stick like it was something sacred. There was no audience, no celebration, just the 4 of them and the wind and the scent of apples ripening on the hill. At dusk, they sat on the porch, wrapped in quilts, watching the sky turn to embers. You ever think about naming this place? Xavier asked, his arm around her shoulders. Willa thought for a long moment. I don't need to name it, she said. It's home. He pulled her closer. It is. Years passed, slow and good. The children grew tall, strong from the work and the air and the steadiness of love. Willa taught Daisy to spin and Declan to read by oil lamp. Xavier built a smokehouse from riverstone, and in winter he sang to the children in a voice rough with warmth. Nothing grand ever came to them, no riches, no titles. Just peace and soil under their nails and the kind of love that doesn't need proving. They grew old together on that land, hands still calloused, hearts still sure. and the valley held them, quiet and true. Through every season they weathered together.